So we know traditional risk factors for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, lipids, hypertension, hemostatic thrombotic disorders, behavioral disorders, demographic reason, genetic. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death globally. It accounts for 1/3 of mortality worldwide and 28% mortality in the Indian population. There was a paper which was published in Lancet in 2013 where they compared the mortality in 1990s as compared to what happened to South. Alright, so let me tell you, being Indian or maybe a Southeast Asian is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. The reasons which we can discuss at the dinner table. The average age of a heart patient in India is in his fourth decade, and the average age in the Western population is in 60s. The youngest patient I have treated for a heart attack, I understand, is a 22-year-old employee in an MNC. And the oldest patient I have treated in cardiovascular disease was a 97-year-old American lady whom I did an MD valve replacement. So this gives us that I don't know where we are moving, what happened in the past 20 years, that we have become world leaders in cardiovascular disease. I think that is food for thought. We all need to think, ponder, discuss, educate our society about it. What do you think, sir? So 30 to 40% of all cardiovascular disease patients are younger than 40 years. That is the prime age when the patient or when the person is earning for himself, for his family, for his society, and that is the time when heart attack strikes. So, Framingham study was a very important study. They came out with various risk scores, risk factors, and just look at this slide actually. More than almost 50% of patients, when they develop a cardiovascular disease, they have one or less than one risk factor for a heart attack. So you must have seen in your practice, a patient comes to you, he has a heart attack, his family or his wife says, "Sir, he never smokes, he doesn't drink, he doesn't eat non-veg, he's not obese, he walks every day, he works, he's a farm laborer, nobody in his family had a heart attack. Then why did he have a heart attack?" Right? We must have seen similar type of patients. That means we are missing something there. What we are doing right now, we are focusing on all traditional risk factors, hypertension, diabetes, obesity. These are the traditional risk factors. Definitely we might be missing smoking, yes, you're right. So definitely we must be missing there. There's some other factor which plays a role. So this is where inflammation comes into role. So inflammation affects coronary artery disease, peripheral arterial disease, carotid artery disease, and valvular heart disease. So let us look at the coronary artery disease. We all know this is a very common slide. You have an atheroma which is present in the coronary or the carotid arteries. The atheroma is composed of macrophages. When they ingest the LDL particles, they become foam cells. More and more macrophages are recruited into the plaque. And the plaque which is rich in macrophages is an unstable plaque. And then there is smooth muscle, there is neoangiogenesis, microvessels which form into the plaque. And the plaque which has higher macrophages, higher level of inflammation, and a necrotic core, lipid core, is an unstable plaque. And why is that so? Because they have a thin cap which is prone to rupture, and once the cap ruptures, the tissue factor is exposed to the blood, there is thrombus formation, complete occlusion of vessel, and precipitation of a myocardial infarction. So this is how the inflammatory process affects patients who have coronary artery disease. And what happens if you put stents in them? It has shown that if patients have high level of inflammation, and if we put a stent in those patients, they have high chance of developing restenosis, acute and subacute stent thrombosis. Peripheral arterial disease is another very important component. Patients with diabetes, smokers, Burgess disease, various other abnormalities, they have systemic inflammation. Similarly, patients with aortic stenosis. Let me tell you, aortic stenosis is now considered to be a systemic inflammatory disorder. Aortic stenosis is a lethal disease. People die from aortic stenosis. The mortality rate with symptomatic aortic stenosis is worse than most malignant cancers. So I have seen patients dying from aortic stenosis. So then, how should we measure this inflammation? There are various markers. ESR, various other things which are going on. But one thing which has shown, by which we can measure inflammation, is HSCRP. C-reactive protein, HS stands for highly sensitive. How many of the audiences measure HSCRP in your patients? Anybody? Right. So this is a very interesting slide. It is a multivariate analysis which shows that the probability of developing a cardiovascular event is more with HSCRP when it is high compared to systolic blood pressure, total cholesterol, and non-HDL cholesterol. Very, very interesting slide. So you have two patients who come to your office. Both have LDL cholesterol of 100. So you think that both of them will have similar cardiovascular event rates, right? Based on the LDL cholesterol, because both of their LDL cholesterol is 100. But look at the graph number 1, which is right on top here. And look at this graph. So one is a combination of low LDL, low CRP, and here is a combination of low LDL and high CRP. When patients have high CRP or higher inflammation level compared to patients who don't have high CRP or have less inflammation in the blood, they have more cardiovascular event rates compared to the same level of LDL cholesterol. Interesting data. Similarly, patients who have low LDL and low HSCRP have less cardiovascular events. HSCRP adds prognostic information to all levels of LDL cholesterol at all levels of Framingham risk score. So this vascular disease. Anybody in the audience? So there are two risk scores, basically there are three risk scores. Framingham risk score is 1. Framingham risk score does not account for HSCRP and family history. The risk score which accounts for family history and HSCRP is Reynolds risk score. They are all available online. What you can do is, you just feed the data in the computer and they are going to give you a risk score. So what does this risk score give? It gives the chance of developing a cardiovascular event in next 10 years. So initial definition, low risk was when it was less than 10%, intermediate was 10 to 20%, and high was a high chance of developing cardiovascular event. I will also not get HSCRP levels done for a patient who falls into the low risk category. Then who is the ideal patient in whom you can get an HSCRP level? The ideal patient is one who has an intermediate Framingham risk score to develop a 10-year cardiovascular events. Based on all these data, there were various recommendations help direct further evaluation and therapy in primary prevention of cardiovascular disease. 2010 ACC/AHA guideline for assessment of cardiovascular in asymptomatic patients measure CRP in apparently healthy elderly patients to identify cardiovascular risk. So this was based on Reynolds risk score. 2013 use of HSCRP for stratifying the high-risk patients for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. So by now, we all agree that inflammation plays a very important role in cardiovascular disease. Inflammation can be measured by measuring HSCRP. There are various other things which can be measured, but I'm not going to go into detail. And then we also saw that when HSCRP added on top of LDL and various other traditional risk factors, it affects the outcome. I'm going to go in a little bit into detail. We all know about this slide. It's a very common slide which we have seen in our second MBBS in our textbook of pathology. You have activated monocytes. They adhere to the endothelium. The monocytes enter inside the vessel wall. There is an LDL particle which comes into the vessel wall and gets oxidized. The monocyte ingests the LDL. It converts into macrophages and foam cells. And that is where the inflammation starts. Dr. Solanki had made my job easier when he explained all NFK beta thing. So there are two pathways which are activated, NFK beta pathway, kynurenine pathway. NFK beta pathway is a pro-inflammatory pathway, kynurenine pathway is an anti-inflammatory pathway. There is release of more inflammatory mediators, TNF alpha, IL-1, IL-6, which leads to expression of more additional molecules, more monocytes come into the atheroma, more and more cholesterol or LDL particles which come into the atheroma, and that is how the plaque becomes unstable. So unstable plaque, as I clearly said, it's a plaque where there is high inflammatory activity, like more macrophages, more necrotic debris, thin cap, and high HSCR. Kynurenine pathway, one of the metabolites in kynurenine pathway is HAA. It is a defense mechanism against inflammation. So what are the current options which are there to treat inflammation in cardiovascular disease? One which we will all agree upon is statins. So statin is a revolutionary medicine in the field of, I would say, medicine as such. It has got so many properties. It has got mainly people call it because of pleiotropic effects, but now people have started doubting it because of increased new incidence of diabetes mellitus. I don't know. I mean, incidence of new onset diabetes mellitus, which is yet to be proven. Actually, there is 1 in 10,000 chances of developing diabetes. Then you have kynurenine pathway, HAA, and on the NFK beta pathway, as it was clearly stated by Dr. Solanki, that the NFK beta inhibitor is curcumin. This slide, everybody is well versed with this slide. There's an inflammatory stimuli, NFK beta gets activated, goes into the nucleus, there's translocation, expression of inflammatory mediators, more and more inflammation all over the place. So what does curcumin do? Again, same slides. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm going to skip all these things. It acts on multiple actions, reduces inflammation. So curcumin's anti-inflammatory role in cardiovascular disease decreases CD-active protein, decreases MI associated with CABG, significantly reduces the serum cholesterol, prevents progression of diabetic nephropathy by attenuating proteinuria, decreases fasting glucose, HbA1c and insulin index. Kynurenine pathway, let me be very frank, all these type of flowcharts we used to read in the textbook of biochemistry and we all used to hate it like anything. But yes, one important metabolite of this pathway is 3-hydroxyanthranilic acid. It has anti-atherosclerotic effect and it reduces the LDL cholesterol. I would prefer to skip that slide. But yes, 3-HA, what are the effects on lipid metabolism related genes? It inhibits TNF alpha in macrophages, involves PPAR gamma, which contributes to the effect of 3-hydroxyacetic acid on plasma lipoprotein, significantly increases liver mRNA, ApoA1, ABCA1, which leads to increase in HDL. As you know, HDL is a good cholesterol, LDL is a bad cholesterol. I'll just pause here for a minute because most of our patients, I mean, what I see is when they present with myocardial infarction or maybe even before myocardial infarction, their LDL cholesterol is within the normal range. It's always 70s, 80s, 90s, 100. I've never seen a patient with LDL of more than 190 and having acute MI. So one important reason is we Indians, we might be having bad quality of LDL cholesterol rather than the quantity. So there's something to do with the particle size. So the particle size of LDL cholesterol in our population is smaller. Smaller the LDL particle, it is more atherogenic. I don't know how to make the size particle bigger, but one definite way to make it bigger is to exercise. Start walking, start jogging, don't use elevators, use lift, use stairs, and do more and more aerobic exercises. That is one way to increase particle size. The other reason why we have a lot of coronary artery disease is our diet is mainly carbohydrate-rich diet actually. So we end up getting a lot of high triglyceride levels, and though these studies, most of the studies, what they showed is when you're targeting triglycerides, you're not really affecting any cardiovascular outcome in a big way. I usually start patients on fenofibrates if triglycerides more than 500, and that is to decrease pancreatitis and vasoactive manifestations. So 3-hydroxy, 3-HA, it affects on plasma lipids. It decreases lipids by 1/3 to 2/3, decreases plasma cholesterol, decreases triglycerides, significantly reduces infiltration of CD4 T cells in atherosclerotic lesions. 3-HA significantly reduces inflammation. There's 80% reduction in atherosclerotic lesion, and by now you all will agree if the inflammation inside the atherosclerotic lesion is less, that plaque is a stable plaque. It is less likely to rupture in the future. It is less likely to precipitate an acute coronary event. To summarize, 3HA is an intermediate metabolite of kynurenine pathway. It has following clinically significant benefits: it improves lipid profile. 3HA significantly reduces vascular inflammation. Very busy slide. I think we can easily skip it. These are all newer targets for newer studies. Conclusion: despite optimum therapy with current drugs, still 1/3 of low-risk individuals with 0 or 1 Framingham risk score have been known to develop atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. This is what I was saying. No risk factor, still got a heart attack. Controlling inflammation will help improve cardiovascular outcomes and may also further help reduce morbidity and mortality in patients with cardiovascular disease. Let me be clear here. So this is going to be an additive therapy to what is the standard practice. It is not going to replace, as of now, statins or antiplatelets or anything else. Thank you very much for your kind attention.